This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Jackie O and you're listening to Militantly Mixed.
Yo, this is Rashani from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
I would like to acknowledge that the Militantly Mixed podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Chumash and the Tongva people, and I wish to pay my respects to the people of those nations, both past and present. Hey y'all, welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Charmaine, aka Mixed Girl Maine, the busiest mixed race, bisexual, polyamorous, atheist, comic book nerd, cat mom, mask making, Gulf Coast Cosmos, comic book co-owning, Asian American Podcasters Association's Golden Crane Award winning podcaster in this podcasting game. This is episode 129, and it has been a really difficult week for those of us that are from Asian descent. Besides the increased violent attacks against Asians and Asian Americans since the COVID-19 pandemic, the murders that took place last week in Atlanta have really struck some internal issues and points of pain that I am dealing with. I have talked a little bit about it over the last few months, but for the first time, I think really for the first time in my life, I am actively addressing and dealing with issues I didn't realize I was experiencing related to my Asian heritage. And that's why I have always described myself as hierarchically mixed, that I'm Black first and then Japanese and then British American. I thought I was a lot more secure in my Asianness than I actually am. And over the course of the last few months, as I have started to be embraced more in Asian and Asian American spaces, it has brought up a lot of issues and emotions that I have with it. And because of that, also recently you've noticed that most of my guests are of mixed Asian heritage, and that is because the people I've been interacting with who find the show through these things that I've been participating in have been the recent people who have been on the show since December, people I've been interviewing since December. And so while it hasn't been intentional that I was actively pursuing people of mixed Asian heritage to be guests on the show, I've just been in so many more Asian and mixed Asian spaces that it has afforded me this opportunity to connect to a lot more people of Asian heritage. And then on top of it, what is happening in the world right now, or at least in this country, in the United States, where I'm recording from, an increased amount of violent attacks against Asian and Asian American people, and of course, the murders that occurred in Atlanta. And I am really struggling to figure out how to process what I'm feeling against what is happening in the world. I don't want to take up too much of this particular episode's intro discussing that, so I will at least just say that I have released a live stream that was on March 18th, but it's still available on YouTube for viewing, in which I sat down with 3 other people of mixed Asian heritage, and we discussed the increased violence against Asians, and we discussed the murders last week, which will be available probably by the time you're listening to this intro. I've already released the audio of it on the Militantly Mixed podcast platform, but it is also available on YouTube, and I will put a link in the show notes in that. I've been lucky enough over the last week to participate in a few safe spaces to talk about and process my feelings related to the murders in Atlanta last week and the increased violence against Asians. Starting with Sonia Smith Kang, the president of MASK, Multiracial Americans of Southern California, hosted an Instagram live with Asian Soph last Wednesday, and they discussed what had happened on Tuesday of last week. And then following that, I participated in a fireside chat with the Asian American Podcasters Association, in which after that discussion, everybody that was on that call took away an action item to create resources for Asian American Podcasters Association to release so that other podcasters could know what to do to address these issues. I'm going to be sharing some of those bits of information as they become available, because I do think they'll carry over into the everyday citizen, what you can do if you want to support the Asian American community. And then, of course, I had my own live stream with Asian Soph, Naturally Mona Lisa, and Tiffany Lytle, all content creators of mixed Asian heritage, that where we were able to have an open discussion kind of from our mixed Asian and our content creation perspectives. Like I said, I'll put a link to the show notes of that live stream, and the audio will be available on the Militantly Mixed podcast platform as well. But I am not fully prepared to engage outside of the Asian American and or mixed Asian community spaces on this topic yet, because I haven't quite figured out where I'm at and what I feel. I do know that I want to support the community. I want to know what my entry point into supporting the community is. And I'm doing that work right now. So I am by no means the expert, the go-to person to discuss this. I have a number of people that I go to discuss this with. And I just encourage y'all to open up your social media searches and things like that right now, and follow a lot more Asian American activist platforms, and increase your access to information and knowledge, because that is actively what I am doing right now as well. But I will do my best to share what I can as things become available to me and as I am learning. One way in which I'm trying to leverage Militantly Mixed to support the Asian American community right now is similar to last year when I created the Mixed and Hella Black fundraiser t-shirt for Black Lives Matter, in which 100% of the profits of the purchases of those shirts went towards Black Lives Matter, and continue to do so, except that that shirt has not been available since I left my previous drop shipper and have been converting things over to my current drop shipper. So that shirt will become available again soon. But I have launched a Mixed and Hella Asian t-shirt that is also a fundraiser t-shirt. 100% of the profits of that shirt will be donated to various Asian American organizations that are doing work towards ending the hate focused on Asian or Asian American people. And I have a few of those listed because those are the ones that I've already researched and have access to information about. But as I learn more, I will probably be adding more organizations. As of right now, the ones I'm focusing on is Stop AAPI Hate, which is Asian American and Pacific Islander. I'm going to be focusing funds in that direction from the purchase of those shirts. Also, Butterfly Asian and Migrant Sex Workers Network, which provides resources to support people of Asian descent and migrant workers in the sex work industry. And also the Asian Americans for Housing and Environmental Justice here in Los Angeles, who we have been filtering funds through here and there through my Mask by Maine company, the head of which is Camila, who you would have heard from on the Intersectional AF episode last May. So I will continue to do my research, and I will release information as it becomes available, or as it becomes available to me. But I really do encourage y'all to engage in as much as you can on learning about what is happening in the Asian American community right now, because as mixed people, I think we understand the importance of solidarity, but within our separate monoethnic communities, we should be doing some work and communicating the importance of solidarity, because the root cause of this problem that we are experiencing in the Asian American community right now, and in the Black American community and the Latinx American community, is white supremacy. That is the root problem. That is the root evil: white supremacy and white terrorism. And that is what happened in Atlanta last week. That is what has been happening in this country for as long as this country has existed, honestly. But without solidarity, we are not going to be able to protect ourselves. We also need solidarity from the white community that wants to combat white supremacy within their own spaces. We also need them too. But I think starting within our internal monoethnic groups and our mixed race heritage groups, we can hopefully support the other communities that are experiencing trauma at the hands of white supremacy and white terrorism. There's a lot of work to do. And it has been just an insanely emotional time across this whole last few years of not knowing how to process every time there's a hate crime. But again, I don't want to focus all of this intro on that topic because the guest that I have today, we recorded 2 months ago before this was part of the news cycle. So it's not addressed in this particular interview. But I will address it in other episodes and in other ways on all of the Militantly Mixed platforms. So continue to stay focused on that. My guest today is Kate Medina. She is a senior at Berkeley and one of the executive directors at Mixed at Berkeley. And I'm just so grateful to Mixed at Berkeley, first for inviting me to participate in their Mixed Month last October. But since then, I've had a chance to speak to a number of their directors and members. I also was invited to speak last month on a Black and Asian solidarity panel with fellow cousin Rohan Jolie with incoming or potentially incoming Mixed at Berkeley students. And it was a really wonderful experience. So Mixed at Berkeley really for me and for Militantly Mixed is kind of the gift that keeps on giving. And Kate is also one of those gifts. We had a really wonderful conversation. And like I said, it was recorded back in January. She and I had tried to connect at the end of last semester, but it was around the time that she was experiencing finals. So we recorded in January before this last semester began. So she is in her last semester, her senior year at Berkeley. And it's been a very difficult year because of the pandemic and not being able to actually be a meet space Berkeley student. So we talked a lot about sort of mourning the loss of what your final year at college could have been. We talk about her own mixed race experience within her Korean and Mexican heritages. And of course, we get to know her a little bit better. I do want to highlight that we did have some internet connectivity issues, most of which I cut around, but there are some clicks and pops and some, trailing out here and there throughout the episode that I couldn't really fix and or cut around. So I just wanted to let y'all know that. The other thing is it came up the Mixed Bill of Rights towards the end of the episode. And while we have talked about the Mixed Bill of Rights on various episodes of Militantly Mixed in the past, I am not 100% sure if I've ever read the Mixed Bill of Rights on the show. So I want to read it to you right now so that you have this in your mixed race arsenal as you maneuver the world as a mixed race person, but also just so that you kind of have it in your head when it comes up in the episode towards the end. The Mixed Bill of Rights was something that was, I believe it was first published in 1993. It was written by Dr. Maria P. Root, PhD. And it is, when you really need affirmation and validation as a mixed person, you should have this available to you. Bill of Rights for people of mixed heritage. I have the right not just to justify my experience in this world, not to keep the races separate within me, not to justify my ethnic legitimacy, not to be responsible for people's discomfort with my physical or ethnic ambiguity. I have the right to identify myself differently than strangers expect me to identify myself differently than how my parents identify me, to identify myself differently than my brothers and sisters, to identify myself differently in different situations. I have the right to create a vocabulary to communicate about being multiracial or multi-ethnic, to change my identity over my lifetime and more than once, to have loyalties and identification with more than one group of people, to freely choose who I befriend and love. This can be found on the internet just by searching Bill of Rights for Mixed People. I have also posted it on all of the social media Militantly Mixed platforms several times, so it is available. But those words, the first time I got a chance to read them, was basically everything I was wishing were true, but didn't believe about being a mixed person. But seeing that it is there in black and white to to have in my back pocket in case I ever feel invalidated or am self-invalidating. I have the right to stake my claim in my own mixed race identity. And I appreciate Dr. Maria Root for releasing this back when she did. And I hope that you all use that to remind yourself to be your mixed ass self, whatever that means for you at whatever time you are feeling a certain kind of way. It is valid and it is okay. And you are fine. Okay. Without further ado, I want to get into today's episode. So please join me in welcoming our latest cousin to the Militantly Mixed family, Kate. Tell everybody about yourself and let's get into it.
Right. So, hi, my name is Kate Medina. I am a fourth year at UC Berkeley, entering my last semester. I am the internal executive director of Mixed at Berkeley Recruitment and Retention Center at Berkeley, and I am Korean Mexican.
Thank you for joining me. And I really appreciate it because I know at the first time we started being in contact, you were about to hit finals and it was going to be crazy at the end of last school year. So we're trying to get you in before we get started on your last semester. And we did talk a little bit offline about how weird this experience has been. Your senior year has been basically you in the same place that you're sitting right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a non-senior year, essentially.
Yeah. Has that kind of, how does that impacted your education? Like, what do you feel you're getting out of this past year versus your entire college experience?
I feel so nostalgic towards my past years at Berkeley. Like, I just miss being able to just like walk outside, like having to hurry my butt over from one end of the campus to the other end of the campus within 10 minutes. I miss seeing people's faces. I miss being in the Bridges office where I could see my team Mixed at Berkeley. I miss, just grabbing food and eating outside with friends and whatnot. I just miss the small things. My whole senior year is basically on Zoom, and I'm still mourning the loss of like what could have been, not only for academically, but just personally. Like there's a lot of relationships that I know that I could have built, in person, but it's not as easily feasible online. And I was talking to my brother the other day, and he told me like I was telling him all the sad parts about like not having senior year. And he's like, you're still a Berkeley student. Like you still have that like notoriety of being a Berkeley student. I'm like, but I don't have a senior year.
Yeah, you don't go to Berkeley by accident. You go, you could go to any college right now and have a Zoom experience and you get your education and that's great. But you go to Berkeley to physically walk the campus that has been the seat of a lot of civil rights work and uprisings have happened. Famous people have done work in those communities. So it's not an accident that you apply and go to Berkeley. It's not your fallback school.
Yeah, definitely not.
In most cases. So like, I understand that you would grieve that experience. And especially if you still live close too. I know some people have gone, back to wherever their homes were to do school, but it just takes, I understand that would bum me out honestly, I did a remote master's program. It was an accelerated online master's program. And this was 10 years ago when that was like kind of still new happening. And I forget, that I had a master's because I didn't have a grad school experience. I was doing it all at home, and I did make connections with some people that are my friends now, but most of that was all developed online, and it does feel less important than my BA when I actually got to be on a college campus. So I get that. Yeah. So let's get into talking a little bit about you being Korean Mexican, what your upbringing's like, and what the food is like. Cause I love a mixed food situation. So let's start there. Do you have any foods that you mix between your Mexican and your Korean? You got anything that works together?
Yes. So I'm a big fan of tapatio. I love tapatio, and everything is good. Bokkeumbap, which is just mixed rice. Kimbap, which is, it looks like sushi, but it's not sushi. It has like vegetables inside and it's wrapped in seaweed. We can make tacos out of like Korean marinated meats. My mom is Korean herself, but she makes a lot of like Mexican food. So her children will be happy, and I'm always happy whenever she like attempts to make Mexican food. She's not bad, actually. Like, I appreciate it a lot. It's delicious. Yeah, and then like whenever I would go visit my dad, because my parents are divorced, like he would not hesitate to like go to a Korean restaurant and try new things and use chopsticks, and it's all very natural.
Nice.
It's nice. Like the fusion or just incorporation of the other culture is like very smooth.
That's awesome. So that's been the case your whole your whole upbringing up till now? That's awesome. Yeah. Did you feel like you understood at a young age that you were mixed and what that meant to non-mixed people? I'm going to separate that question by like pre-parents divorce and an after parents divorce. Because like when my parents were still together, it was, there's no question about it. I didn't even think about it. The fact that my parents came from two different backgrounds. I had my brother to, relate to all these experiences with, like, we were in this together. Like everything is as it should be. This is what I was born into. It's natural. But after the divorce, and then when I moved schools and everything, I had entered a all Latinx elementary school. So it was just a very stark, like a little bit like a kick in the face, when I entered that school with my brother, because like the students in that school did not have any experiences with people other than outside of their culture. So like we were like being taunted as like Chinese, like a lot of racial slurs, and like we felt very ostracized from the rest of the school community. Also, like within our church, like because I stayed with my mom, like we would go to a Korean Presbyterian church. I still felt so different because like I could not relate 100% to what the kids and even the teachers were saying. Right. And like I stayed quiet because I felt like that was my only defense, be quiet, don't reveal anything about yourself in church, just do the service, leave. Leaving was what I was looking forward to. Yeah. And I don't know, within this whole like I guess childhood experience, language was a huge barrier too, because my parents didn't speak each other's language, so their middleman, I guess, was English. So we would always constantly speak English. And I mean, of course, I know a few phrases here and there. I know the commands my mother tells me, to like do my chores and whatnot. And then whatever my dad says, Spanish comes a lot easier to me. Just, Did you grow up in California?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Los Angeles.
Okay, so Spanish, you just kind of hear it, whether you are aware of it all the time. It's just everywhere we are. Yeah. The separation became more stark when I visited like both sides of my family separately, and like being quiet was my defense. Even in my own family, like I don't reveal that I cannot fluently speak Spanish. If I be quiet, then I can stay in the background. Same with my Korean side of the family. Like I needed my mom to translate, which was kind of tough. But being quiet was the safe bet. And just like the only thing that could like tie me to my family, in my opinion, was like food, and then the fact that we loved each other, and that was it, and that was enough. I mean, food helps. Like I don't take the food part lightly at all. Like part of it's just fun because we have exposure to all different kinds of food from all different kinds of places. Exactly. And if we're lucky enough for those foods to work together, then we can have like little mixed dishes and things like that. I love that kind of stuff. That being said, sometimes I'm using food as a way to validate I am in fact a mixed Japanese, or I am, a mixed Black person or something like that. Like even yesterday, I've been missing my grandmother a lot, and I can't cook the things she can cook. So I had to get takeout so that I can get, something remotely close to what she would make. And it was good, but it made me miss her more, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's not her food.
It's not her food. So I think food is a stabilizing thing for us to make us feel like we get it, or we're part of the culture. And language barriers. I have them too. So it's frustrating because you have an ear for it. You can kind of pick up some of it, not enough, but it's when someone realizes that you aren't fluent that's those moments where it does hit home. How do you think that affected your personality? Did it make you a quieter person in general because you were actively being quiet in spaces to not reveal your identity?
Yeah, like I'm definitely more of the introvert in my family. Like I think because I stayed quiet and I listened so much, I'm more of the observer now within like, you know, my own personal spaces and friend groups and whatnot. And I find that the bigger the group, the quieter I am, but the smaller the group, the more vocal I am.
Okay.
But I don't think that's a bad thing, you know. It pays to be the observer sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you get good information you wouldn't have heard otherwise. So how did you once you got into Berkeley, how did you get connected with Mix at Berkeley? And were you already somewhat, I know quiet, but quietly vocal about being a mixed person before you got to school?
Before I got to Berkeley or was ever accepted by what was it? Oh my gosh, what was that program called? Oh my God. It was a program where seniors are like accepted seniors are invited to Berkeley to basically like find their community before they ever accept Berkeley themselves. Oh gosh, I forgot. It's such a big event. I'll figure it out. I'll say it.
It's like, to be fair, our memories are weird right now because of COVID. Honestly. And not having outside stimulus. So you're fine. Don't feel bad.
Thank you. But yeah. But before Berkeley ever, you know, accepted me, like I struggled to find space. I struggled to like relate to different like monoethnic groups, my cultural background. It was like I tried so hard to fit into like the Mexican community, especially since I do not look Mexican. I very much look Korean. The Asian gene is very strong.
Although when you turn your head a little bit, you do you shift a little. Yeah, you see like if your profile, like slightly profile, I see it, which happens all the time. I'm actually looking for it when I'm talking to guests of the show because I see it happen sometimes when someone's race just changes based on where their position is. So I can see I can definitely see that you're a mixed Asian, but when you turn your head a little bit, I can go, oh yeah, there's a little Mexican in there. I see it.
But that's a relief. At least I show some part of my dad's side.
We get it where we get it.
Exactly. Pre-Berkeley, I struggled to find space within my cultural backgrounds. Like I wanted to be more Mexican because I didn't look Mexican, and I wanted to be less Korean because I looked Korean, but also I had such a struggle fitting into the Korean community. Like I do not fit the mannerisms. I cannot be cliquey. I'm just going to be very general about the Korean community. They're kind of cliquey, and also I prefer Mexican food more. So like if I'm in Mexican spaces, then that's if I'm in Mexican spaces, then that's preferable. My stomach will be happier.
I got you. No, I know. Like it is. But the Asian, regardless of what kind of Asian we are, those are sometimes it is harder to separate from the monolith because culturally, especially East Asian cultures. The monolith is important. Like, you know, it is.
That's a survival tactic.
Yeah. So like we try to speak not too generally about race and ethnicity in general, but it's hard to do that on the Asian side. Like it really, really is. So I understand that feeling of just like if your mannerisms are even slightly not in line with everybody else, that means you're not Korean or you're not Japanese.
Exactly.
And that's tough for us.
Yeah, it's harder to relate. And yeah, like, but on an individual level, like if I'm talking one-on-one to someone, I would try to make it as clear as possible to show my identity and more than what they perceive me as. Like an example of this would be like I was in the 7th grade, and I was like at a workshop with my mom, and then the teacher presenting, like he was presenting about scholarships that we could possibly apply to, right? And there was the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, and he was presenting about it, and he used me as an example of someone who would never be able to get that scholarship. And then I just remember whipping my head around. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm half Mexican. And then he looks to my mom and she like confirms it, just like nodding. And oh God, I hope he learned something, you know, like that was some bullshit like experience right there. Yeah.
Hopefully he holds on to that one as a constant reminder to not make assumptions.
Exactly. So
the worst possible person for it to hit on is a mixed person who is definitely going to have identity invalidation in that moment.
Exactly.
That sucks.
And I throughout high school and middle school, like I tried so hard to like, introduce myself. Like that's my fun fact. The fun fact is I'm mixed and I'm Korean Mexican, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's so cool! Wow, can you speak?" No. Oh,
that's the first question everybody asks.
That's okay.
Do they pick it up from your name too, though? Like your last name?
No, they think I'm Filipino or something. Like even my PE teachers had thought I was Filipino.
That's true.
I mean, not that that's bad, but that's not me.
It happens to me too, because I grew up in Long Beach, so I grew up in a mostly Black and Mexican community. I'm Japanese and Black and mixed with white as well. I identify more with the Black side, even though I look the way that I look. I'm ambiguous. And so when I have long curly hair, they think I'm Mexican. When I have long straight hair, they think I'm Filipino, because they can tell that I'm mixed, but they can't tell what that is. And they always go to just Filipino because it's, well, on the West Coast, they go to Filipino. On the East Coast, they go to Dominican. So it depends on what coast.
What? Dominican?
Yeah. Well, on the East Coast, because they have more Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, they're used to Latinx faces that have Black features. So Dominicans in particular do have more Black features, but you can tell they're Latinx. I have Black features. I look more Asian now because of the way my hair is, but when my hair is longer, people think I'm Puerto Rican or Dominican. But if I'm here, because we don't have many Dominicans on the West Coast and we have mostly Mexicans, they think, okay, it's either Mexican or you're kind of vaguely Asian, so maybe Filipino.
I feel like that way it's kind of a superpower, you fit into different groups you never thought you would be able to fit in. But yeah, it's another round of the game of how can we best label this ambiguous person?
Right, exactly. So when do you feel like, you said something earlier, which is a feeling I've had many times throughout my life, and I know others who listen to the show do as well, of that thing of like, because you look the way you look, you kind of wanted to be the other thing that you're mixed with. For me, I identify mostly with being Black. I was raised Black. I grew up in Black community. I was only Japanese in my grandma's house, my Japanese grandmother's house. So, but I'm yellow and I have Black straight hair. So what am I going to do to try to affirm my Blackness to people wherever I'm at? How did that, for you, how did that manifest? Like, were there moments of just like feeling, oh my gosh, I need to look more Mexican today? Or does it flip between both cultures sometimes? I
don't think I've ever found the perfect recipe to look more Mexican. I was just like, what if I put my hair in braids and wear hoop earrings? But then that's kind of problematic. So no. But no, I can't help the way I look. I'm just going to be vocal about it when the opportunity arises. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Like when I came into Berkeley and I was so grateful to be part of Mixed at Berkeley. We were called MSU back then. Like within my time as a director, we changed the name to Mixed at Berkeley. I was just so grateful to be part of MSU because that was the first space that I ever encountered that was purely mixed, and I felt so at home and so free. Like despite people not being the same mix as I am, the fact that they had the same experiences and beliefs about being mixed, was such a relief. Yeah. It made me so happy. But then I also realized, I think I should come into touch with my Korean side a little bit more and then my Mexican side a little more. So I tried to look into, those monoethnic groups. I tried joining CASA, which is the Korean American Student Association here. And that was not for me. I cannot drink as much as they do. I cannot be so social. As an introvert, that exhausts me. More power to them, whoever can do that and pull that off. But no, not for me. And then,
when I know that about yourself.
Yeah, exactly. For my health and well-being, I cannot do that. But when I tried to join Latinx groups, I think I ostracized myself. I know there were times where they're like, "Oh no, it's okay that you're here. You're Mexican, it's fine." But I myself did not believe that, and I didn't feel comfortable. My own head, I was just psyching myself out. So I would just leave that space immediately and never come back. And luckily enough, however, a friend this summer reached out to me, and he is also mixed. He's my mix plus Japanese. And we're like, why don't we make our own Latinx student association together? And we did. We did make our own group, and it's still new, but you know, we're gaining traction a little bit. But like, I feel like the difference with this is like we're not like Chicanx like focused. We're not like Mexican focused. We want everyone of all backgrounds to come, and I feel like that's such a relief for me, because then people like me won't be so hesitant to enter like monoethnic spaces, quotation marks, monoethnic spaces, and just find, you know, like fellowship with each other, and it's easier. In my opinion.
Honestly, that's been my trajectory as well during doing Militantly Mixed. So I've been talking about being a mixed person my whole life. Once I realized people didn't see me as Black as a teenager, I had to start talking more about my mixed stuff. And we didn't have affinity groups when I was in school, like not for mixed folks. I would try to go to the Asian ones. The Asian ones are tough. Again, like we talked about.
They are. Oh my gosh.
Not being part of the monoethnic part, like whatever that is, because even amongst Asian American affinity groups at school, you have your Chinese people who grew up in America, but they speak Chinese. You have your Korean folks that grew up in America, but they speak Korean. You get your Japanese folks who don't speak Japanese because they grew up here and they assimilate. You know, you might have some that speak Japanese, but a lot of them don't. And then you have your mixed ones what are just like, hi, we're trying to be here too. And that extra step of removal, like, and maybe it was my generation, it just wasn't a welcoming environment for someone like me. I hope that those spaces are a little bit more open now than they were back then. But the 90s was about like exerting your individualism within a tribe, which is very strange because everybody wanted to be unique, but they also wanted to be unique at the same way that their friends were. You know, it's a dumb time. But now to see that schools have these places, I've had this experience doing Militantly Mixed. Is at first it was like, I wonder if I can find some Black, Japanese, white mixed kids. And then it was just like, oh, hey, this Black and white kid had the same experience I had. Oh, this Asian and, you know, Iranian kid had this similar experience I had. And I started to realize I was getting more out of the fact that the mixed experience was happening across whatever our groups were. That being said, it's still really exciting when you meet someone who has your mix and has had like one instance in their life that is similar to one that you had, you know.
Exactly.
We're tribal people, you know, humans tend to be tribal. So this is our little way of like finding it however we can. I think it's important to create a Latinx Asian hybrid space because there's so many. And for some reason, people think those aren't two groups that mix, but all throughout South America, there's tons of Asian workers that went over to South America. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Peru has had a half Japanese president, but he's Peruvian. He's Peruvian and mixed with Japanese generationally. But the Colombians has a very big Asian population. The Chinese and Japanese in particular have gone through many parts of South America, including Brazil and stuff as well. So there's like actually a lot of South American Asian mixes. And then in Mexico, there are pockets of, in particular, Chinese, but you know, there are a lot of different Asian pockets there as well. So the fact that people don't realize there are so many mixed Asian Latinx people is very strange. So I think creating a space like that, even as you're doing work for Mix at Berkeley, you know, maybe separate from that too, I think is important because your experience is going to be unique to a particular group of people and they're going to need to walk in and be comfortable, you know, especially if your names make people confused when they look at your face.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
They look up and like, explain, please.
Yeah, like I don't have a smoother way of saying it. You see that face where they look at you and they're like, but you said you were Korean. Why is your last name Medina? That's funny. So with the Latinx and Asian fusion group, is that something you're doing on campus or is that something you're doing like Facebook or out in the world somewhere?
No, it's on campus. It's a campus group. It's LSA, Latinx Student Association. It's not a specific Asian and Latinx fusion. It's like the fact that the some of the directors are this mix, and some of the other directors are like Peruvian, and you got Salvadorian, and you got Mexican, like a bunch of different backgrounds. I feel like that's more welcoming towards a more diverse membership.
Oh, that's true, because for the longest there's been mostly Mecha is one of the so like one that has a very Mexican and Chicano based motivation or something like that, not like a spread out across all of Latinx type environment. I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That makes sense. What do you get out of doing this work? What got you from being a participant at Mix at Berkeley versus becoming a director at Mix at Berkeley?
Maybe this is a typical story within Mix at Berkeley people, but it's just like, the fact that, God, what was the name of the program? I was so mad. But being invited as a high school senior to Berkeley and getting to experience that like community and the possibility of continuing to be in this community while at Berkeley was just so special. And like, you found your pocket of people. You're not going to let that go so easily. So you're going to have to join that group that invited you over, right? So whether it be, Mixed at Berkeley, whether it be Raices, whether it be CAS, which is for Filipino Americans, like we have 7 different recruitment and retention centers under Bridges who do invite students over. That's one of our events that we have every spring semester. So you're going to want to hold on to that. You're going to want to find fellowship within that. You're going to want to join. And there are like opportunities that come with being within these recruitment and retention centers. You got scholarships, you got, events that cater towards your interests. You got, academic support, everything that you could look for within a group when you're starting out at a new, huge school is there. So I stuck by it. I was with Mixed at Berkeley for 4 years. This is my 4th year now. And so from intern to I then moved on to becoming a retention director for 2 years, and that's basically like cultivating our Berkeley community, within our own students, like inviting people over. We throw events that ranging from like having like an internship or a fellowship opportunity for our community members to having more social events like making slime or Valentine's Day social, or to events that cater more specifically towards like our features and our beliefs and stuff like that. So like our curly hair event was definitely more popular, I think, because it was fellow run and it people were learning about how to take care of themselves and their hair and therefore empowering themselves through their ambiguity. There you go. Thank you. Just super powerful. And even me, like I don't have textured hair, but like I could see how people were so excited to, learn this new part of themselves by people who are like themselves. So I feel like Mixed at Berkeley is definitely like a very powerful and important group on campus. And I think we should continue to stay like that. And spaces like this are definitely important, especially for people of my background. I'm, a person of color. I'm low income. Like I would not have come to Berkeley if it were not for groups like this or, nonprofits and stuff like that. I needed a village to like get me here. And the fact that there is a place where I can reach out and seek support and friendship, like that's super powerful.
Right. Yeah. And it's amazing too, to see like how much that actually aids in your educational development, or I guess even probably your development as a person when you get community support versus when you don't. Like I said, I grew up in Long Beach. I'm a hood kid. The fact that I've been able to do any of the things that I have been able to do has a lot to do with other people stepping in and helping me do that, because I wouldn't have had the resources on my own. So I think also having benefited from an experience like that, doing work towards benefiting others is another layer of kind of, reinforcing how important it is, because if somebody helped you and you want to give back and help to others, is that something that you think you'll carry outside of Berkeley? Like, what is it that you want to do once you get out of school?
That's a loaded question.
I know.
But, I forgot to mention, yes, my 4th year now, starting from last semester, I'm internal executive director. So like I moved up a lot, I think. And so now I'm facilitating spaces and directors. And I feel like, me with my Katrina Bullock, she's the external executive director. Like, I think we're doing a great job so far, given the circumstances of COVID, which is very hard.
Right.
I think we're trying our best to, sustain this community.
Yeah.
As for your question about what I want to do after Berkeley, I still don't know specifically what I want. I think I'm more of a go with the flow type of person. And I think that's my major is indicative of that, because I made my own major. It's consisted of 3 topics. It's environmental science, design, and ethnic studies. And it's just topics that there's a lot. I think it's very broad and general, and it gives me a lot of room to work with. But looking back at my time at Berkeley, and especially within Mixed at Berkeley, I think I want to head into like the nonprofit sector first, like maybe towards education or maybe towards like identity or something like that. I want to kind of like pay it forward a little bit. There you go. Pay it forward a little bit so other students can, like be comforted a little bit by the fact that they are who they are, and it's beautiful. And like, if you need extra help, like I want to be that person to extend that hand. But I first got to find the perfect nonprofit to work at. I still need to look for it, but yeah, I think that's where I'm going to head off first before deciding anything else.
And so
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. And so getting a chance to work within the organization like this is maybe kind of even giving you a few little ideas of how you can make that work if you find an existing nonprofit. And if you don't, you can make your own and do the work more specifically. Like, calm down. I mean, yeah, it's crazy. Like when I started Militantly Mixed, my first goal was to selfishly meet other mixed people to talk to them, because I grew up.
That's a great reason,
right? Like I grew up with my mixed brother, my mixed cousins. We lived in the same house. All of my aunts and uncles were mixed because both of my parents are mixed, so multi-generational. So I was never not around mixed people. I also grew up on military bases, so we were always around mixed families. It wasn't until we became civilians and I moved to a white suburb that I realized that there weren't people like me all over the place. So I think I have a slightly unique mixed experience in that my mixedness was constantly validated. It wasn't until I left that bubble that I started to realize there was going to be identity problems and stuff based off of the other people that I was around. So when I started Militantly Mixed, I was just feeling the void of not having my mixed family around me all the time, not being around my mixed friends from military bases and stuff like that. So I wanted to recreate that. And Militantly Mixed was kind of how I started to do that. But then very quickly, it kind of also became a therapeutic thing in that I wasn't feeling isolated, and the people I was talking to weren't feeling isolated anymore, because there was this other person somewhere on the planet who was feeling very similarly. And then as the show continued to grow, it got harder and harder to not want to pay forward to somebody what the guests and the listeners had been giving me. And so now this is a whole different monster than it was when I started. At first, it was just like my cute little way of trying to make mixed friends. And now it's, a combination of I'm creating like family. I'm creating community through this. And in doing so, I have opportunities to be of service, to be helpful. And I think being a Berkeley student, you might be very community minded anyway, because of the nature of that university and the history of that university as being very service to your community oriented.
Yeah, the plight of your experience with Militantly Mixed sounds a lot like what Katrina and I are trying to reorient Mixed at Berkeley towards. Because like at first, yes, it was a space to find other people to like revel in our mixedness, to finally find pride within ourselves and have friends who are like-minded as us. And it's cute. It's great. Like we have to love ourselves first. But for a while, that kind of became stagnant in my eyes. Like, the same programming message was occurring year after year, and we wanted to expand a little bit more. So the more traction that, Mixed at Berkeley got, the more that we felt like we needed to reorient and start like adding a more educational lens into Mixed at Berkeley, because like as mixed people, we do have a privilege of seeing into multiple different cultures and being able to see the intersectionalities between all of them. And more power to us, right? But that gives us a responsibility to, act a certain way and just fight like white supremacy and supremacist views about like what it means to be a person of color, what it means to be a mixed person. So yeah, that's our responsibility. So like me and Katrina have been creating a curriculum for Mixed at Berkeley, starting within our directors first to like relearn and re-educate like what it means to be mixed. And like we started talking about like what it means to be privileged, and we talked about like racial imposter syndrome and code switching and colorism like anti-Blackness within our spaces, like we started introducing topics like that so that we can, you know, maybe walk a little bit away from the cute, like, oh, we're mixed stuff to more of a like social justice, like empowerment role. So like we definitely think like groups like Mixed at Berkeley and then other recruitment and retention centers can be more empowering in that way. Not only finding fellowship, but also like giving us a responsibility within our communities as people of color, mixed people.
I also think like the fellowship aspect is the thing that supports the mission. Like you can be mission and exhaust yourself and wonder at some point, why am I doing this? But you have that fellowship element to it, and it reminds you, it humanizes the experience of other mixed people, not just your own, because I know I have a very specific mixed experience, you have a very specific mixed experience, but when you see what is affecting other people, it's like, oh, it reminds you why you're doing this work, and it kind of re-energizes the next step. So I think both are important, and I'm glad that like the craving of fellowship was the reason why I started something, you know, or got involved in anything at all to get to the mission. Because if I started out with the mission, I'm not sure I would have been as successful, because I don't know what would have kept me, like what would have been my foundation. But you have to remember, you know, the village. If the village has a need and you can support that need, then the work is meaningful, but you have to be able to see the impact to be able to keep motivated for it. So I think
that's true.
I think both of those things are absolutely important. And it's a bold thing to transfer something over from being purely social to having a social justice or a, civil rights push to it too, because I mean, I think it's an easy thing that's going to happen specifically at Berkeley, but I also think you can get really complacent in a reputation, which I think Berkeley does have sometimes, is like, we're the school that does this thing, so that when something problematic does surface, it's like, oh, but remember how we used to be the one that did this thing?
Exactly.
So it's good that you still have those avenues to be able to do that. What has the school year been like? I can't even try to grasp what it's like to want to stay motivated, still feel like you're doing school, that everything has a purpose, while having to be indoors all the time. Do you have satisfaction? Like, what is happening? How do you get to feel like your mixed ass self when you're stuck at home all day?
It's definitely hard, and burnout, I feel like, comes a lot quicker especially during the quarantine, because you can't have as much face-to-face time as you did before, and that was one of the joys of being at Berkeley, a mix at Berkeley, face-to-face time,
right?
But I don't know, just Mix at Berkeley, like our organization, we tried so hard to sustain ourselves and our membership. And at the beginning of the year, it was great because like all of a sudden we had like 60 people show up to like our little mixer at the beginning of the year, and who are people who are interested in like trying to feel like they belong, especially at a time where you cannot possibly belong anywhere because you are at home.
Right.
So it's been tough, like I've checked out so many times. I've burned out quite a few times, but then just remembering that there are people who need me, and I just have to continue on and work. And like, it's so easy to just ignore, your responsibilities generally, like even without thinking about being mixed. Generally, it's easy to ignore your responsibilities, but like remembering there are people who need you, and you need to make this organization survive somehow. Like that's your responsibility. This is your baby, essentially.
Right.
Once you're director, it Mix at Berkeley's your baby.
That's true. And then you have to also be continuing to do the work while transitioning out and waving in the next group of people, and also trying to maintain enthusiasm for the organization as you are stuck at home and they're stuck at home. Yeah. I think the challenges that sheltering in place and quarantining had for any of us that do, because Militantly Mixed was always this way. I was already, FaceTime or Zooming with people all beforehand, but the problem is monitoring the traffic now. but it's so much more traffic than it was before. So if I end up in a room with like 15 or 16 faces on a screen, it's harder to make sure that everybody feels seen and validated when the whole goal of what you're doing is to try to see and validate people, on any of these mixed race like group events and stuff like that. So I imagine there are a whole different levels of challenges to retention and recruitment in the group when it's possible that you might have 60 people on a screen and you can't talk to all of them and you can't focus on all of them. Are there things that you seek out in terms of your own identity? Are there things that you are trying to actively seek out since you don't get to be outside as often right now to connect to your cultures?
Food is the number one answer. Just everyone wants to, because you have to stay in, you're going to want to cook more, right? You're going to want to be more exploratory with your meals and stuff like that. So that's what I've been doing, especially when like in the summer when I was back home in LA, like with my mom, like we tried a bunch of different recipes. Like I made birria, which is like, I feel like that's super like trending in TikTok right now, birria, like tacos and whatnot. But it's essentially supposed to be like a goat broth kind of, but you don't have to use goat. You can use beef or whatever you want. But the fact that it's like a saucy meat is the main point of that. But yeah, I made that myself and I ate it. And I felt super satisfied because I couldn't go out to the food truck, with my abuelita to like actually eat and drink birria. So I made that myself. And then we tried a bunch of different, like I made dumplings with my mom because that's what we do, during times of celebration. But there's no celebration. We just got to fill the time and our stomachs.
And you make a good point about being an LA based person and not having food truck life, because food trucks are such a big part of all pockets of LA culture, like regardless of what ethnic group you're from. It is such a huge part of how we get some like good dirty street food, and we don't get it right now. We have to DoorDash everything, and it's not exactly the same.
No, I really hate the waste for DoorDash. I mean, I like eating from different restaurants, but I hate waste. But that's what we have to live with.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I also feel guilty to like risk this other person's life to go and grab me some food just to bring it to my doorstep and stuff like that. I'm definitely dealing, but I am a terrible cook, so this is how I have to survive because I don't. And if I do cook, I won't eat it because it's terrible.
Oh no.
Yeah, so that's fun that you get a chance. So is both sides of your family here in LA though? Do you still, even though your parents are separate, do you still get to see both sides?
I mean, not as much as before, but my mom is the only person who immigrated from her family from Korea because she was tired of, like what I understand is that she was tired of like the social rules Korean people had. Like she really didn't want to continue in that way. It was frustrating for her. And so she decided to like, come to America and make her own life. And obviously like she misses her family there, but she'd rather be independent. She's an independent lady. She's hella strong. I love her.
Nice.
And then, but my dad has his like a good portion of his family in LA. So like I do get to see my abuelita. I talk to my uncles quite a bit. Yeah. And then, it's just it's nice that there's at least some semblance of family especially during quarantine that I can talk to. But for my mom, I bet she's feeling lonely too. Like she's only ever like had to talk to her family through the phone, and I feel like that's really tough.
Yeah. So you haven't been able to go.
No. No.
Me neither.
I mean, first of all, tickets are hard. Tickets are expensive, and then also just I prefer not to risk anything through the airline.
Right. Oh no, I'm not just talking about COVID, but like, have you ever been able to visit family in Korea or anything?
Yes, once in 2011. I was 12 for 3 weeks, and I only remember like my family and food. Yeah, food again. Common theme here. What else is there to do besides eat?
Just gonna eat real fast. In terms of like, so you touched on it earlier, and it's something that I relate to too. Like I mentioned, that thing of sort of wanting to flip what you look like to match what you identify as. How fluid is your identity? Do you feel like you jump between them pretty easily, or do you always feel like a Mexican with a Korean face, or do you feel like Because that's my deal. I feel like a Black girl with a yellow, ambiguous Asian Latinx looking face.
I feel like I'm neither, really.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like as mixed people, we walk a fine line between our cultures and stuff. Like we both belong and we do not belong within these cultures. And I feel like I've internalized it to a point where I'm just like, I'm neither, but I guess I participate in both. And I look more of a certain way, but I certainly do not feel that way.
Right.
So yeah, I've become a spectator, but when those moments come where you're just like, yeah, that's home to me. Like, I love it. I miss it. Then I'll have those moments, of course. But most of the time I do feel like an outsider and I'm just watching.
I mean, that's a part of this experience. I know there's times what I'm trying to reclaim for myself now, even at my age, versus other times, is the being more than rather than not enough of. Not enough of has been the theme of almost every mixed person that I know. Like my literal family was the ones telling me I wasn't Japanese enough to be considered Japanese.
That sucks.
Or like hiding from my Japanese family that we were Black because we didn't want them to know we were, tainted in some way, shape, or form, with quotation fingers. Where the white side is just like, they're there, but I don't know them, and yet technically I'm half white. Like, it's very bizarre to have this half ethnic identity that I didn't grow up with anybody who had that identity, that was white, besides my British grandmother. So there's all this stuff of just like, I'm not enough. I'm not British enough. I'm not Japanese enough. I'm not Black enough. Now that I'm old and like personally, I like being old. I'm trying to be older than I actually am. I'm a curmudgeon, and I'm like, I want to sit on a porch swing and like yell at kids.
That's the dream.
That's the dream, right? Like, I just want to pull my socks way too high and wear an oversized shirt and just sit on the porch and yell at kids. That's goals. That's life goals for me. But with that, I want to claim for myself that I have this benefit that that most people don't have, or at least monoracial people don't have, is that I have multiple cultures to pull from. I can be Japanese today. I can be Black today. I can be British today. I can do it multiple times in a day, and I can double back to the one I just was a few minutes ago if I want to. And that's something that they don't get to do. And to me, that should translate into I have more. Not in a way of like I'm better than or you're better than, that kind of stuff, but in a way of just like stop reducing myself in my own story, which I think is something that we do as mixed people a lot. We defer to the real, whatever, fill in the blank ethnicity, like the 100%ers, we defer to them. And I don't think we necessarily should have to, because we are a part of the story now too. And you not being the only Korean Mexican mixed person out there, you just have to find the other, you just have to find other people that feel like you, that you can understand that a little bit better, which I know is what we do attempt as we join Mixed at Berkeley, or we start a podcast about mixed people. That's the goal and the effort that we're putting in. With that in mind, since you do so much in terms of mixedness, do you find yourself continuing to struggle with your identity from time to time?
Of course. Like everything that you had just mentioned reminds me of the Mixed Bill of Rights. And it's just basically a piece of paper, empowering yourselves and reminding yourselves, you're more than what people say and perceive you to be. You are so much more. You are so much more powerful and so much more beautiful than what people think of you to be. And forget people, like entering pre-college, I was definitely in the mindset of like, I'm not enough. I cannot belong here. I will just, I'm a wallflower. Don't look at me. But after college and then joining Mixed at Berkeley and then reading the Mixed Bill of Rights and entering like ethnic studies classes and stuff like that, that definitely empowered me. So it's less of a me problem, but it's more of a you deal with me being mixed problem. Exactly. And I will not educate you in anything, but I'm just going to be happy and satisfied with myself because I am bombastic and amazing.
I love it.
Thank you.
No, that's important because I think generationally, like people that were mixed before me, they come from generations where you're not supposed to talk about it. And then my generation kind of talked about it, but only if you had to. Like there were more ambiguous looking people from my like second generation mixedness than like biracial folks that preceded me. And so you kind of had to address it sometimes because people needed to know, but it still wasn't comfortable to talk about. Whereas I think in your generation, we're getting closer to being able to be more out of the closet about our mixedness. That being said, we're still dealing with people that are uncomfortable with us, thinking that it takes away from them in some way, shape, or form, or reduces the ethnic groups and cultural groups in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I can see that within my own family too. Yeah. Just like within like my Korean grandparents, like I'm sure they did not prefer my mom to marry someone out of the Korean community. And then for I don't think my would either cared so much. Like she was like, "Oh, your mom is very beautiful," type of thing. But like I had talked to my dad's dad, and I asked him like, "Is it okay that I mixed? Like, is it like, did you want your son to marry someone who wasn't Mexican?" And then he just like looked at me for a while. I know he was hesitating, but he's like, "No, it's beautiful." And I'm like, okay, sure. Thanks, Grandpa.
Thanks for giving me that one. Yeah, I think it is a challenge for people, especially cultural groups that hang so hard together. You know, like Mexican families, your family can be so huge, but everybody feels like immediate family. That's not really the case in British families. Like my dad's mom's side of the family, like they spread out over the world and they may or may not talk to each other, and that just is what it is now, right? So I don't feel like I have this like touchstone to all these people because they spread out and left. Whereas when I am around like my Black family or Black people I grew up with, you feel like family just because you grew up down the street from each other. I think these types of cultural groups that do have that sense of like wanting to stay together, I think it is a little bit of a struggle for them to welcome mixedness. But as they do, it's really nice when we have those family members that are. It's funny, like you said, your abuelita was like, "Oh, she's pretty, so that's fine." Like it wasn't about her race; it was about whether or not she was attractive.
Exactly,
and that's cute. That's sweet. All right. Well, we are coming a little bit to the end of this. And one question that I like to ask everybody that comes on the show is, because I know that we deal with challenges as mixed people, but what do you love most about being mixed?
That I'm not limited by whatever my culture says has to be done or fulfilled, like whatever my family says, who I can date, what I can do, whatever, I'm not going to follow that because it doesn't apply to me because my parents didn't do the exact same thing. So therefore I feel more empowered to, do the things that I want and love the people who I want and, believe the things that I want because like I feel like I am the representative of, not conforming, I guess. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense, good. But Thank you.
I mean, I think anything that reminds you that you're fine. You're fine.
Yes.
Like that's what's more important because I think we put a lot of stock in what other people feel about us and we minimize ourselves in our own stories. So I'm glad that you're making those efforts. Even though you say you're introverted and quiet, I'm not quiet, but I am introverted in that I just generally prefer to be alone, but I like being on Zoom with people. So I get my social element without having to be forced to hug people. I got a hugging issue. So
that's understandable. More power to you.
It's a cultural thing. For two sides of my culture, like the Japanese and the British aren't huggers. So I'm really only huggy to Black people, and then everybody else I'm not. It's very weird, but it's a code switch too. It's like I grew up hugging Black people, and it was fine. I grew up trying to hug my Japanese family, and they didn't like it, so I learned not to. And then my British family don't even try. So yeah, I just have a weird thing about hugging, and I love Zoom socialists because then I don't have to address it awkwardly to people. But separate from all of that, I like hearing that you are actively trying to maximize yourself in your own story versus minimize. Two, also because we come from East Asian cultures, I think I definitely know it's the case for Japanese, but I also have heard it's similar for Koreans, where the group is more important than the individual. So how dare you be loud or be bombastic or, that kind of stuff is a big part of the cultures that we come from. So, claiming our own individual version of our cultures, I think is important too. So I'm glad. It just makes me so happy because I know that I've been talking to people for a couple of years now doing this work, and I hear it. I hear the trends of people not feeling comfortable owning their story to now where people are starting to get. So I'm really glad that you're doing that work, both for yourself and for people that are going to be around you, because it's going to resonate. People are going to see it. And I appreciate it.
We want people to grow within their mixedness and their own identities. Like, that's the point. Like, I hope for a lot of people, like, Mix at Berkeley will be the beginning of their mixed journey. Yeah. And then by the end of it, they'll be 100% themselves and love themselves.
Absolutely. So why don't you let everybody know how they can find Mix at Berkeley if they're looking for it, or anything else that you want to share?
Yes, so you can find Mix at Berkeley on Facebook, which is Mix at Berkeley Recruitment and Retention Center. Mix at Berkeley also has an Instagram, which is at Mix at Berkeley. And then as for me, you can find me on Instagram, which is at Piece of Kate, which double underscores after every word. So piece double underscore Kate. And that's cute. On Facebook as well, just Kate Medina. Thank you.
I love putting your name into things. I mean, I'm Charmaine, so I say Maine everything. ManeHustle is my media company. Main thing.
I love puns, man.
I love it. So I 100% appreciate your Instagram handle. That's so cute. Oh, well, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate you. Thank you for having me. That I can help leverage the work that you all are doing. I'm here for you guys. I'm pro Mix at Berkeley, but also as you venture outside, anything you got going on, always feel free to come back and leverage Militantly Mix or me or whatever. I'm here to support however I can. I do appreciate you.
Thank you, Charmaine. And thank you for having me. And thank you for creating a platform like Militantly Mixed. It's just so powerful and empowering. And like, I feel great that I'm able to share my story with like a wider audience that is in Berkeley.
Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Charmaine Fury. Music is by David Bogan the One. You can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed. If you'd like to become a sponsor of Militantly Mixed, please go to patreon.com/militantlymixed for monthly sponsorship, or paypal.me/militantlymixed for a one-time only donation. And if you like what you hear on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to be your mixed-ass self. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.